Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always, thanks to our incredible sponsors, GSK Pharmaceuticals, for allowing us to share amazing lupus stories. And we have one today. We have Sarina Mawji, all the way joining us from Vancouver, British Columbia, in the great country of Canada. And Sarina is a lupus patient, of course, and has a real interesting story about how she's in the process of really restarting her life after a really long battle with lupus. And why don't we start by welcoming Sarina to the podcast. How are you, Sarina?
Good. Thank you for having me, Adam. It's a pleasure. Doing well.
Excellent. So we're going to talk a little bit about your early story. And what I think is incredible about you is how you have just a really amazing attitude about what you've been through, which our audience is going to hear has been a lot, and where you're headed and what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about life before lupus and pre-diagnosis.
For sure. It was great. I remember it very, very well. I work in social services, and my job's very demanding. So I work with children, youth, and families. And it is days were busy, weeks were busy, very involved with family, former athlete, so competed in a lot of sports, played a lot of sports, coached a lot of sports. You know, when athletes can't play, we coach.
Right.
So also coached a lot of sports in between my injuries and things like that. So, you know, it was a very busy, active life. Worked within local government up here in one of the local governments in my region, and life was great. Very busy, and then boom. I remember flying to my friend's wedding in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is this one province away, and it's like an hour flight, 45-minute flight. It's not long. And I had just kind of lost vision. I had this big electrical shock behind my head. I lost vision for felt like a minute or so, but it was like 30 seconds. And same thing when we were descending. And so that's when I knew something was wrong. So when I was supposed to go to Ottawa, a few provinces over for work after the wedding, but decided to come back home to Vancouver. And I was like, do I drive back home or do I fly back home? I flew back home and the same thing happened. So
really?
That's when I knew something was up.
So both on takeoff and landing,
correct,
you just sort of got that's a very interesting symptom.
Yeah, it was a very interesting symptom for sure. So, you know.
And how old were you at this point? Where were you in?
I was 29.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 29. And to do the math very quickly, that's good. I'm awake this morning. Yeah, I was 29. And so, anyways, came back home, and, you know, the whole gamut of trying to convince your doctor that something's not right. You're young, you're healthy, you're active. Well, thought I was healthy, but active. And you look healthy. And so, you know, the whole gamut of, please believe me, I swear something's wrong. And, you know, you get the whole, you're young, it's too much work, too much this, drop that, or it's anxiety. The usual stories that we hear from patients, and especially female patients. So this took a long few years to get to see some doctors, some specialists. And, you know, the wait times sometimes for MRIs, just to get an MRI or to get a CT scan, at that point I was waiting up to a year sometimes. So, you know, and then you get on the cancellation list and whatnot. But just to convince people that something is wrong.
Now, let me ask you this. After the airplane incidents, while you were waiting and going through all the doctor situations, et cetera, did you have other symptoms? Did other symptoms start to come out?
I did, for sure. I think at that point, you just start to notice some stuff that you weren't noticing before, right? You piece it together. You know, you get one pearl and one bead here and one bead there and one bead there. But when you put them together and you string them together, you're going to get a necklace, right? So at that point, I was like, all right, well, why are my joints killing me? Why is everything so swollen? Why am I in pain? Why am I so tired? Blurry vision, losing balance, just heavy, heavy fatigue. And then I got the beautiful, beautiful red cheeks happening.
Right.
And it was like, you were in makeup? I'm like, I don't wear makeup. I don't know what this is. And so then of course, the butterfly rash. So yeah, things were progressing, things were happening, things that I wasn't necessarily realizing which were symptoms or were. So yeah, and then what we found out was the pressure from the airplane was putting pressure on the optic nerve, and the optic nerve could have severed from my retina, i.e., causing a stroke. So that's what that was. It was like, all right, well, thank God I was okay. But yeah, no, I had tons of symptoms, and because it took so long for the diagnosis, by the time the diagnosis came, I was pretty sick. So affected a lot of organs. Um, and at that point, I had to be put on pretty aggressive treatment, both oral medication and intravenous treatment. And it was a tough 4 or 5 years to kind of get back to a baseline for sure. And in the middle of that 4 or 5 years, we have the global pandemic. So, as lupus patients know, the treatments are not easy. They give you the similar side effects as the symptoms of the disease, right? You read the box, you're like, be aware of blurry eyes, be aware of nausea or heavy fatigue or muscle cramps or joint pain. And it's like, all right, well, we kind of need to do this, but we're going to still feel not that great.
Right.
So it was a hard battle. And for someone who's a workaholic and an athlete and go, 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 when you can't do something, whether you want to or not, it's just heartbreaking. So there's a psychological aspect of it, as well as a physical aspect of it. And then the friends and family around you also don't know what's going on. And how do they support you when you also don't know what's going on? So I think it was hard, not just for me, but for my team, for my village, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think what's interesting too is that, obviously we have different healthcare systems in our country and your country. And I think there's so many
mhm.
advantages to universal healthcare, obviously, but there's also this wait time um, issue, which I think is could have been really dangerous if you decided to fly again. If was there treatment for the retinal pressure? I mean, or just regular lowering the inflammation of the body essentially took that pressure off your optic nerve?
Yeah, no, I agree with the two healthcare systems. I agree that there's pros and cons to both for sure. And it could have been dangerous. There wasn't specific treatment for my eyes and the optic nerve. I believe it was just the inflammation. We needed to lower the inflammation very quickly and as soon as possible. Now, with my experience since being diagnosed, after being believed and things being found, to correlate with what I was trying to communicate. And of course, I didn't have the medical terminology at that point to communicate what was happening. When we do need a rush CT scan, i.e., for my lungs or for whatever else, that is possible. But when I feel patients are not being believed, the system, they just get thrown into this backlog system anywhere, really. And I think we just have to hear patients and say, wow, losing vision is not normal. I mean, it's not okay. And so let's expedite this. But I think it just I wasn't being believed for a while and kind of
And I
written
think
off.
that's tough for most lupus patients because there are probably a
Correct.
lot of them that fall into that category with sort of these
Yeah,
nebulous symptoms and doctors not believing them and saying lower your stress and
exactly.
all of the common issues that we face.
Yeah. Well, I
So
think
I
it's
think
so important,
it's
right?
yeah,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think it's great that
Finish.
no, I think it's great that you're highlighting that because I think my hope is that a lot of doctors hear that and realize, okay, wait a second, we need to make sure that we're expediting things that when some of these potentially nebulous symptoms or putting it's all about putting the puzzle together, right?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it.
And I
That's
think
exactly it.
the data is what's important, and the speed at which you get that data is very important.
Agreed. And the absence of evidence, right, as I always say, is not the evidence of absence. So we look at labs, oh, your labs are normal, right? How many lupus patients or chronic illness patients have heard that? Because there's no such blood test or marker that says, yes, you have this, or yes, you have that, right? Doctors have to put the puzzle together, like you were saying, and they can only do that if we're heard. And it can get very dangerous, as you were stating earlier, and you kind of touched on earlier regarding the optic nerve in the eyes. Now, it did get dangerous for me because I had a rheumatologist who didn't believe me and was like, no, you're fine, everything's fine. And here I'm like swollen hands. And I remember one tennis match, my racket went flying further than the ball, and I'm like, can't hold on to the racket. The ball's supposed to go across the net, right? Not the racket. So she's like, no, you're fine. But by the time I was diagnosed, even years after that, because I had to continue advocating for myself, it had impacted more organs than it had impacted earlier, right? And so I was so sick when I was diagnosed and you can't reverse a progressive disease. You can't reverse the inflammation and the damage or the plaque or whatever it may cause in various organ systems. And so that is a dangerous thing when doctors are not believing or hearing. And I also understand doctors are very busy, right? The medical system, wherever you look at it, is inundated in any system right now across the world globally. And doctors are super busy. I get that. They have a lot on their plates, right? They work within the same medical system that we're trying to navigate within. And so I think to understand both sides is great, but doctors really do need to take a beat, come into the appointment, and just use some active listening skills sometimes.
Because you went through this long period of diagnostic exploration, when you got the diagnosis, because of the butterfly rat, did it make sense to you? And what was your sort of immediate reaction? I know you were super sick. So is the relief there? Is the anger there? Tell me about your sort of state of mind.
I think I was, and you know what? That's a great question. I've never been asked that question. Excuse me.
That's why this podcast is so amazing, right? We
right?
ask the tough questions.
You guys ask the questions that the doctor should ask, like after the diagnosis, how are you feeling? What can I do? What do you need? No, that's a really great question. For me, it was relief. For me, it was a massive relief. Type A, right? Athlete. Let's figure it out. I need to know who my opponent is so I can adjust my game plan, right? So I have a game plan. What's the next steps? What are we going to do? For me, I was just so sick that it was a massive relief. I hadn't heard about lupus until probably 5 years into the diagnostic journey of trying to figure out what was going on. Initially, it was thought to be a neurological autoimmune for a very, very long time. And so when lupus was thrown around, it was thrown around only within 3 months before my diagnosis. So it was all new to me at that point when I was diagnosed with it. So for me, it was massive relief. My world was upside down. I didn't know what was going on. I was really, really sick. So for me, I didn't have time to process it. It was like, we got to get you started on treatment, this heavy treatment. We're going to do both oral and IV, and we need to kind of bring you back here because of your multiple organ system involvement. And so I think in expanding that, because again, it's not just us receiving the diagnosis directly, it's our team, it's our tribe that receives it as well. And it impacts your world. So I think for my family members and friends that few were in disbelief and didn't know what lupus was, again, hadn't heard about it, didn't know how it impacted, oh, okay, it's an autoimmune of the organs, but no, it's much more than that, right? We know that and how it manifests. And then for some family members, it was a lot of anger. It was a lot of anger and a lot of frustration within the system and
anger at the system,
or
not anger at you. Not anger
no,
at you,
not
anger
anger
at the system.
At the system
right.
That took so long. Here, Sarina's so sick, and we could have done something about it. And I think that is the common thread in a lot of chronic illness patients around the world in terms of it's invisible. So it's not a broken leg, you put a cast on it, right? You can't just x-ray this. And so how do us chronic illness patients around the world, lupus patients, how do we continue to advocate for ourselves when we know something's wrong and we need a diagnosis soon, right? And we don't want all these labels. I don't want to be Sarina with lupus. but I need to know, once you know it, you can tame it, hopefully, right? You can deal with it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, when you did get the treatment, the right treatment, how fast did you notice improvement?
it took a while. So I was on, I started treatment in 2017, like spring 2017, mid 2017. And I started noticing it really wasn't doing as much as we'd hoped. So we then started IV a little bit after that on top of the oral medication. And so I would say to notice the difference, I would say it was a good year and a half. Like I was pretty far gone. So it took a good year and a half. Of course, within the first 3 months of any lupus management medication that's been around, the progressiveness is hopefully slowed down or stopped hopefully. But I think within a year and a half, I kind of started feeling like I could think, like I wasn't just surviving hour to hour to hour. And so it was really hard. I wasn't very present mentally for sure. I was just
Were you
going
still
through the
working?
motions. No, at that point, I was pulled from work by my doctors. I was working through all the testing, all the diagnoses for years. I was diagnostic testing. I was working through, even after the diagnosis, really sick. Somehow I was making it into work. I felt like I was crawling into work, crawling out, coming home, sleeping on the couch in the same clothes, barely waking up the next morning, and somehow doing it. But at that point, my doctors at the time of treatment was like, that's it. We can't trust you enough to to slow down. So yeah, no, I at that point, and I don't know how I would have continued looking back at it. I don't know what I was doing. So yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, when we come back, COVID and how that affected you, because I know that made a big impact. So we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Sarina.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need. Call 310-657-5667 or visit our website at lupusla.org to support the efforts of Lupus LA.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. We're talking to Sarina Mawji, and we're talking about her fight. And your fight got a little more complicated. So you get diagnosed in 2017, you start treatment. A few years in, COVID hits. And tell me about what happened to you during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, so two things happened, two major things happened. I was lucky enough to not get infected with the original COVID and made it to 2021. Of course, like every chronic illness and lupus patient, we were really scared, right, when COVID hit and isolation and whatnot. But I did receive a vaccine, my first vaccine in 2021 when they were rolled out, of course, and I had a really bad reaction to it, allergic reaction to it, just because of my comorbidities, and it was really scary. I was experiencing anaphylactic reactions every 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours, whether I ingested food or I didn't. It could be anything from plain white rice to steamed broccoli, or it could be nothing at all. And I would just be breaking out with rashes and hives, swollen eyes, swollen lips, can't breathe, like a full-blown anaphylactic type reaction. And so, going in and out of the hospitals, local hospitals here, bouncing around, ended up at 4 different hospitals throughout those few months, and no one knew what to do other than just heavy antihistamines. And I think, with autoimmune, we temper our immune system's overactive, right? It's attacking our own body. And so with any type of vaccine or anything like that, we want to encourage the vaccine, either flu shot or anything. We want to encourage it to build antibodies. That means activate the immune system per se. This is the way I understand it myself. And so I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor. But I think for my case, that wasn't the greatest, because what's happened is I think we activated the immune system and then it just went into overdrive. And in overdrive, it infected my mast cells, i.e. the allergy cells. And so, or not allergy cells, but things that kind of pop up because of allergic reactions. So yeah, I went through, I was in the last rites room for a while, and I was very sick. I ended up in refeeding syndrome. So if anyone is aware of refeeding syndrome, that's when the whole body kind of shuts down in terms of starvation. And anytime you introduce food again while you're in refeeding syndrome, you risk sudden like heart attack, stroke, death. It is very dangerous. So you have to reintroduce food and nutrients very slowly, so the body doesn't fully go into shock, kind of, per se, is the way, again, I understand it. So it was very touch and go with these reactions. So again, went undergoing more tests now, and I know the path, because it takes a while to get to an answer, and process of elimination, right, and to put the puzzle pieces together. And I think we're all learning at that point, still in the pandemic in 2021, right smack middle in the summer of 2021. So that was really tough. And then on top of that, here I have lupus. So an aggressive lupus, an active lupus. And I'm still in the middle of treatment for my lupus. And so during all of this, I'm still receiving the IV treatment every few months for my lupus. So it was a really tough go. We figured out kind of what we could do to temper the allergic reaction. So then I started treatment for that on top of that as well. I had dropped down to 76 pounds. I just was horribly sick. And so, you battle through it, you fight through it. I mean, my arms were like pin cushions. At some point they're like, we can't get any more veins. We're going to go into your feet, right, your legs. And so it was pretty bad. And again, it's COVID. So you can barely stand. I had two IV poles with me everywhere. I had to go to the washroom or shower or whatnot. And who's going to come visit you in the hospital? No one's allowed in the hospitals.
Right. That's pretty lonely.
So it is. And then I was in the last rites room for a while. So you're isolated because it's just so dangerous to catch anything. Plus I'm in refeeding syndrome. And this was like, I don't even know how many hospital visits I've made. The hospital discharged me. I'd be home, full blown anaphylactic reaction again, have to go back. So yeah, we were driving to a hospital an hour away. We were driving to a hospital 15 minutes away. We were driving to a hospital half an hour away, 20 minutes away. Like it was just, no one knew what was going on. We were all new at this, stage globally as well. So that was a battle. That was a true battle.
Where are you now? Because I feel like the lupus battle was your first battle. The
Correct.
anaphylactic battle has been a long going battle and has added to your lupus battle. So where are you now?
Correct.
Tell me a little bit, because I know things are, I think, looking up, and it's an amazing fight you've had. So tell me a little bit about where you are now.
Sure. So when I was discharged from the hospital, I was only able to, once the refeeding syndrome, everything was settled, able to, reintroduce fluids into me. I still couldn't eat actual food that wouldn't give me a reaction. So the treatment was taking, like, we were in the treatment for that now. But it takes some time to kick in and for your body to kind of absorb it and calm down as well, right? And the inflammation to go down as well. So from 2021 till about 2024, like fall, autumn, I was on a restricted diet. So I was originally in 2021, I was only able to eat like 3 or 4 foods for about a year that I wouldn't react to or slightly react to. And then 2022, it got to 7 foods. And then 2023, it got to about 11 to 12 types of foods. Like very plain salt, pepper, zucchini, cucumbers, like just very plain food. So all my meals had to revolve around these ingredients. And then finally in 2024, I was able to start challenging some foods, would have some reactions, have to take some meds, and then continue trying. Now, as an athlete, I just want to get going. So let's just continue testing things and get going. So here we are in 2025. I've gained weight back. I've been able to eat a semi-normal diet. I just reintroduced chicken into my diet this year, in March, and I've had a couple of reactions, but I've been okay for the most part. So that's where we are with the vaccine. Follow in terms of the allergic reaction, and then in the middle of that fight with the lupus fight, I caught COVID.
Of
And
course.
then
We all did. We all did.
right? We all did. And then someone with an autoimmune, while this, frail, low weight, can't really eat food, can't take in nutrients, I now have COVID. So now impacts my lungs that are already impacted with the lupus, um, and upper respiratory for me. And so I was very sick with COVID. I did receive the antiviral remdesivir and in the hospital through IV for 3 days, outpatient. And that was in 2022, May. And then I just had upper respiratory infections ever since. I've been on antibiotics from May 2022 every day until November 1st, 2024. So I was on antibiotics for 2.5 years daily, which is hard. And at that point, I was in May, I still received my IV treatment in May for my lupus. So I'm still dealing with the allergic reactions. I'm still dealing with the lupus. I'm in lupus management treatment in May 2022, catch COVID, still on my oral lupus management medication. I had to be pulled off of that to get on antibiotics because you can't be on immunosuppressants and antibiotics at the same time. And then the infections continued. My lungs kept getting worse. I kept going into the hospital. My cortisol dropped drastically. My heart rate dropped drastically. My heart rate was on a good day was like 80 over 50. I was pretty sick. Finally did a CT scan and realized I needed a bronchoscopy. So that was my second bronchoscopy. Went in, washed it all out, pressure washed it all out, scrubbed it, got a little car wash in there. Did some biopsies, and that was in October of 2022. The next morning, I was woken up at 9 a.m. And I'm allergic to lidocaine. So I had to do all of this without lidocaine, without like numbing or anything like that over the throat or anything. And I got the call the next morning that they found, this is in October 2022. I had COVID in May of 2022. I received antiviral IV. October 2022, they found COVID deep in my lungs. And so I was given another dose of antivirals, stayed on antibiotics, and then still kept getting upper respiratory infections, very sick because, of course, my lungs are compromised. And then again, unfortunately, I caught COVID from a family member who had just come out of the hospital in 2023, September. And again, the whole thing starts all over again. At that point, I needed 3 rounds of the antiviral remdesivir. This took me into December, January, February. Again, upper respiratory infections all the way until last October 2024. Finally got rid of it. I still struggle with it, as you can hear, but nowhere where I was. So, yeah, it's been a battle. It's been a battle.
And I know we talked before about you felt a real tough loss in terms of having to stop working because you're really passionate about your work. Cut to the future here now, because I know finally, hopefully, you're past most of the bad stuff you've gone through in the last several years. So tell me a little bit about what's going on now and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, I've come out of this thing fully, fought through it with a lot of support, and a lot of my medical team is amazing. I'm very thankful to them because even when, there's no answers, they walked with me on that. And now we come to this point where, all right, I'm good. For the most part. I still have lupus. I call her Loopy Linda. She'll be my friend forever. So here we are. What do we do now? Can I go back to work? When can I go back to work? At what capacity can I go back to work? Now I work with the public. I'm immunocompromised. When I restart lupus management treatment, I'm going to be immunosuppressed. I have my body loves these upper respiratory infections, I guess, and you get a cold and lungs are gone. They're compromised, of course. And so what do I do? Can I go back to work? I've been in conversations with, you know, with my workplace, and unfortunately, there are no accommodations that can be made for the work that I do if I don't work with the public. And so now what do I do? So now my whole world, the whole sky's open. I have no house per se. I have no career. I have nothing to lean back on. So in a way, I can see the clear sky. And that's exciting, but it's also very scary. And in times of what's happening geopolitically and in times of what's happening with our economies everywhere in the world, I need a job. I can't not work. And so what is it that I can do that is safe for me? Where if I do continue working with clients, which is what I do, how do I do that best serves them, well, yet keeps me safe? And that's where we are right now. And it is very scary. It is very nerve-wracking. It's very concerning. But we can also flip the script and say it's also exciting because now, at 42, I have the world at my fingertips and I can recreate and redesign my world. But that's really scary because,
Right.
my whole world's gone. My whole world was taken from me without any permission at all. And I think, as we move forward with a lot of invisible illnesses, and we're moving forward in terms of, DEI policies and inclusiveness and accessibility. I think we miss the mark on invisible illnesses because yeah, we can build a ramp, and that's great because it works for people with lupus, it works for people with MS, it works for people in wheelchairs, it works for people in scooters, it works for people in walkers with canes. It works for a variety of our community members with different abilities. But again, how are we accommodating invisible illnesses where it comes to grocery shopping, or it comes to living life, or things like that? Where are the accommodations at? When I think that's an exciting time for me in terms of creating more of that awareness of how we can do this when I start to design my new life.
I think that's amazing. I think you're taking sort of what you've learned clearly and bridging that with what you knew before that. And look, I think that's going to help a lot of lupus patients in the future, because I think you're right. I think the accommodations and just the acceptance of lupus patients and what they go through and how they can get through their day. I think that's really important. So what's your advice to people who, I always say sort of the newly diagnosed lupus patient, but I want to skip that today. Give me your advice for somebody who is at that low point, is in that last rites room, is in that that situation where they feel like this is it, I'm at the bottom. What's your advice to how to battle back from that?
I feel very blessed. Even in that situation, I feel very blessed. I remember I had a joke of the day for the nurses who would come in. I think we have to step outside of ourselves to be able to heal ourselves. And if we're stuck within ourselves and woe is me, that's where you're going to stay. That's the energy you're going to stay. And I think as much as we are not believed, or we're not, looked at, or, we have to set the standard and we have to continue advocating. And even in that last rites room, no one knew what was going on. This was all new. No one knew why my body was experiencing all these anaphylactic type reactions every few hours. So I think self-talk, number one, communication with yourself has to be number one. And what you feed your mind is what your mind feeds your body. And I'm a true believer in that. And so the self-talk has to be great, has to be positive. It has to be like, Sarina, okay, turn around in bed and just get that water bottle and take a sip of water. That's all it was. And that was the hardest thing I could have done that hour. But you have to talk yourself through it. I think the self-talk is huge. You can do it. You got this. And there's days where I'm like, after like the 18th upper respiratory infection, or after, the last IV that they couldn't get in the last rites room, and I can't eat, and I'm lightheaded, and I'm dizzy, and I'm exhausted. It's okay to give yourself grace at the same time too. So I think you got to balance that out like a teeter-totter. You can motivate yourself and say you can do this, but sometimes you physically can't, and you mentally just need to take a beat. Give yourself grace to do that. That we're human beings, not human doings. So it's okay to give yourself a beat. So I think that was huge for me. I think stepping outside of yourself is huge as well, because having a joke of the day for the nurses or asking them how their day went allows you to live a life as well, because it's not just about us, it's not just about me, it's not just this is what's going on. Nurse coming in, one of my nurses coming in, her child was sick, and was in BC Children's Hospital, which was an hour away from where she worked in the hospital, and she's taking care of me. So step out of yourself, get to know people. And I think active listening is huge, no matter what situation you're in. Nurse, caregiver, someone in the grocery store, noticing something's wrong, last rites room, talk to people. How are you doing? We don't do that these days, and especially given the pandemic on top of that, I think we've kind of lost that. And when you say to someone, how are you, truly mean, how are you, and be ready to absorb that. And only at that point can we learn. So I think step out of yourself is huge. And I just think honor yourself in terms of when something's wrong, something's wrong. And when someone's saying it's not, there's nothing wrong. I had a doctor come in the last rites room and laugh, going, I don't know what's going on. You're whatever's happening is happening. They sent a psych eval for me as well. And this is what I do. I work with, and he's laughing at me. And I'm like, that's fine. That's all right. That's okay. Because he doesn't understand. So continue to advocate for yourself, be true to yourself, and have faith in yourself, whether you believe in a higher power or not. And I have a really strong faith in myself, but it doesn't matter. Just have faith in something. Have faith in good energy. Life's not fair. Life's not easy. Life's not easy at all. But I always have to remind myself that everyone will get through like I'm here, and I know yesterday was a tough day, and that just reminds me that I've gotten through 100% of my hard days, 100%, no matter what. And you can do one day at a time, 1 hour at a time.
I honestly think that's probably the best advice that I've heard on this podcast in almost 80 episodes. So I thank you for that. I thank you for that last 2 minutes of advice. I think everybody should follow. Not just lupus patients, in life. I think those are really, really good pieces of advice. So, Sarina, thank you. We are excited to see what comes next as you build this new life. We wish you good health and, a terrific future. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.